Okay, so now that we've started looking at populations and how different things can affect population sizes, we're now going to look at how living and non-living things interact in an ecosystem. So your essential question for today is, how do biotic and abiotic factors interact in an ecosystem? This section of notes has two targets. Target 22, you should be able to compare and contrast abiotic and biotic factors of an ecosystem. Target 23, you should be able to explain how living things help contribute to the flow of energy and recycling matter. So we're going to talk about how living things affect the non-living parts of an ecosystem through cycles. Okay, so let's take a look at abiotic and biotic parts of an ecosystem. Abiotic is anything that is non-living. These are the physical features of an environment, like air, water, soil, sunlight, temperature, climate. Those are all abiotic factors. Biotic factors are all the living or once was living parts of the environment. So that can include animals and plants and dead plants and animals. Climate. Climate is an abiotic factor that is basically an average weather conditions. It includes temperature and rainfall. So climate of an area includes an average temperature, an average amount of precipitation. So taking a look at this picture, this climate is obviously the desert climate. The average temperature is a lot warmer and drier. This climate that this guy's in, the average amount of rainfall or precipitation is a lot higher than this guy's. And it might be a little bit colder too. The average temperature might be colder because it looks like he has thicker fur. In our Earth systems, we have a lot of different types of climates, and they're based on your temperature and your amount of precipitation. Okay, so if you take a look at this picture, you've got a rating of a scale. AF, A tells you the location, it's by the equator. Okay, F tells you that it could be cold and frosty. Okay, if you look at CWA, C, warm temperature, W is for desert, A is for hot and arid. So you've got the main climates, the precipitation, and the temperature, the average precipitation and temperature for each climate. We are located in a tan color, okay? So we are usually considered, let's see, where's the color? Yeah, let me find it. We are located at BSK. So we're an arid, which means dry. S, steep, so we're at mountains. And K, cold and dry. So that's usually our average weather for a year. So the type of climate is going to affect what type of populations are within each type of ecosystem. Okay, so now we're going to start talking about cycles. So that was our target, where we need to see the relationship between how living things affect the amount of energy and matter that we have here on Earth. So the water cycle is the circulation of water around Earth. So we're going to look at how water can get recycled on Earth. There's some phases in the water cycle. Okay, evaporation is when you have a liquid going to a gas. Condensation is gas to a liquid. Transpiration is water vapor that enters the atmosphere from plant leaves. So if we start thinking about how living things affect the water cycle, plants affect the water cycle because water leaves the plant leaves and goes into our atmosphere. So that's one way living things affect the amount of matter on Earth. Plants will actually allow the matter, which is water, go from a liquid to a gas. Now, condensation is the process of a water going from a gas to a liquid. This happens in our atmosphere. Well, because humans are polluting, adding pollutants to our atmosphere, when condensation happens, those water molecules that are in a gas phase actually stick to pollutant molecules, which we'll get into a little bit later, and it could fall down as acid rain. So that's one way humans affect matter that's recycled here on Earth, because humans add pollutants to the air, which can cause acid rain to come down in the water cycle, which isn't good for the Earth. Evaporation is going from a liquid to a gas. This happens all over the Earth. It happens on mountaintops, okay, from oceans. All right. Now, the problem that we might have with water evaporating into the atmosphere is that water can adhere to pollutants in the atmosphere when they evaporate. And that's what I was talking about with acid rain. So that's how living things can affect matter, the water cycle. And also, if we take a look at the sun is what fuels the water cycle. Radiant energy from the sun comes down, hits Earth, and that's what's causing evaporation to occur and transpiration. So without the sun, we would not have the water cycle. So let's think about what if there's anything going on that we're doing that is going to harm the water cycle receiving sunlight energy. One of the things is if our atmosphere holds a lot of pollution, okay, it can block some of that sunlight in. It can also trap heat in, which it does as well, but that can happen. Okay, so that's a way that humans affect how energy is cycled, because if we don't receive that energy from the sun, then the water cycle does not keep going. Now let's take a look at the nitrogen cycle. The nitrogen cycle is probably one you're not very familiar with. Nitrogen in the atmosphere is in a compound form, and we learned about compounds in our chemistry unit. It's two nitrogen atoms that are bonded together. That's a nitrogen compound. Okay? In the atmosphere, nitrogen bonds with another nitrogen atom. Okay? Now, nitrogen cycle is taking in nitrogen from the atmosphere and turning it into other nitrogen compounds that plants and animals can use. The way this occurs is through nitrogen fixation. So there's bacteria, which are very tiny microscopic organisms, meaning you need a microscope to see them. They live in the soil and a lot of different other places. They even live on you and in you. Bacteria will take the N2 from the air and combine it with other elements, usually oxygen, so that plants can absorb the nitrogen, and then animals eat the plants to get their nitrogen. Because right now, we cannot take in nitrogen from the air. We have to get it from the food we eat. So the only way to do that is to eat plants, and plants get it from the soil, where bacteria have combined the nitrogen from the air with usually oxygen. So let's look at a picture for this. So you've got nitrogen in the atmosphere. You've got bacteria in the soil. Bacteria fix that nitrogen so that plants can absorb nitrogen compounds into their roots. Then animals eat the plants and get the nitrogen from the plants. So let's talk about how that relates to our target. Okay, so recycling of matter. Nitrogen in the air will not get used unless, okay, I'm sorry, I had to answer my phone, so I lost my train of thought. So let's talk again how living things affect the cycling of matter and energy. So nitrogen in the atmosphere would just stay in the atmosphere unless living things like bacteria took that nitrogen from the air, added it to other atoms to make compounds. Then it's taken up by plants. Plants are then eaten by living things. And then, this is always really fun to say, so when animals Okay. Go number two, they release some of that nitrogen back into the ground and some of it evaporates and goes back into the air. So that's, oh, hold on. There goes my phone again. I apologize. I'm going to keep going. So that is how living things cycle matter through the earth. In the nitrogen cycle, bacteria, plants, and animals are cycling nitrogen through the atmosphere and down into the soil and back up into the atmosphere. Okay, the last cycle that we're going to talk about is the carbon and oxygen cycle. This is the recycling of oxygen and carbon dioxide on Earth. So again, we're going to talk about how living things affect how matter is recycled on Earth. Plants help keep our carbon dioxide levels down. That is one of the most important things that plants do on Earth. So let's take a look at this cycle. So plants are going to take in, let's start with humans. Humans take in oxygen from the atmosphere. That oxygen gets into our cells, which our body is made up of. Inside our cells, we take that oxygen and we use that through the process of cellular respiration. I'm not talking about breathing here. I'm talking about a process that's going on inside our cells, which is what our body is made up of. It's what makes living things living. We talk about more of that in 7th grade. But that oxygen, through the process of cellular respiration, is what creates the energy that we have. So the energy that you have to take notes in class while you're watching this video or run at your football game, that's what you're getting when you eat food and breathe in oxygen. Well, through the process of cellular respiration, we have a waste product, which is carbon dioxide. That's why we take in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. That carbon dioxide goes into our atmosphere. As it goes into our atmosphere, this is something we don't want a lot of in our atmosphere. The nice thing about plants, like this tree, plants take in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Through the process of photosynthesis, plants can make their own food, which is sugar. So they take up that carbon dioxide, make their own sugar, and a waste product of photosynthesis is oxygen that plants release out into the atmosphere, which is what we need. So, living things, humans and plants, and besides humans, it's other animals too, we cycle oxygen and carbon dioxide here on Earth through the processes of cellular respiration and photosynthesis. Okay, so hopefully after listening to the video, okay, you should be able to tell the difference between biotic and abiotic factors of an ecosystem. So if I was to give you a picture of an ecosystem, you would need to be able to point out the biotic factors and the abiotic factors. And then target 23, we focus mostly on how living things recycle matter. Flow of energy we'll get into on, I believe, the next set of notes. So living things recycle matter through the water cycle. They help cycle matter through the water cycle, the nitrogen cycle, and the carbon and oxygen cycle. Those three cycles are how living things help recycle matter here on Earth.